Hello and welcome to What I've Been Thinking with Marcus J. Cage. I'm your host, Marcus Cage, and I'm sure most of you guys have heard about Kamala Harris dropping out of the race, and that's what I want to talk about with you tonight. Some people are a little too happy. Some people are a little too sad, as Chris Rock used to say. But let's talk about all the fallout and the ramifications and some of the things which I think might come about from this. Hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome. All right, let's get started. Since we've already talked about that Kamala Harris has dropped out of the race, and I'm sure all you guys are familiar with that, and those of you guys who are watching this who are not familiar with that, I'm very impressed that you somehow are watching my channel. If you are not related to me or a close personal friend, I thank you for being here nonetheless. We all know that she dropped out, but what I really want to focus on is more of the fallout and the anxiety and why I feel some people are a little too upset and why some people are a little too happy. Myself personally, I'm not a fan of Kamala Harris. Her record is atrocious, and I'm happy to see her go. Although I understand that when your candidate goes out, that does sting. A lot of you guys who know me might know that I'm a big supporter of Bernie Sanders. But what some of you guys don't know is Bernie Sanders in this election was actually not my first candidate. My first candidate was Mike Gravel. Though I've never swayed on my support for Bernie Sanders, Mike Gravel's approach was a little bit more to the more leftward and more aggressive approach, which I would favor for Bernie Sanders to take on. But enough about going into Bernie. This is about Kamala right now. Those of you who are a little bit too sad, you can't be upset and angry and want to put all the blame everywhere else but Kamala Harris. The one thing you have to remember is one of her first rallies, which she started out with, Kamala Harris started out with roughly about 25,000 in California. That's rivaling Bernie Sanders numbers, even currently. The problem is, if any of you guys think back to Kamala Harris, a lot of us on the left, we would attribute a lot of the damage which she took to Tulsi Gabbard's debate performance against her and all the accusations which she leveled, which are true accusations, which can be researched, and plenty of court documents and news clippings from the local newspapers in the Bay Area. Also, there are people who experienced it who have talked about Kamala Harris as a Attorney General of California. So those people who are Kamala supporters who feel, oh, it's just a bunch of smears by some kind of Bernie bros and these white Bernie bros and it's some kind of secret racist thing. It's not a racist thing. It's you've done things in your past. Either you decide, I'm going to stand up and address them and say, you know what? I don't have a problem with these things, or explain it to us why you decided to do this, or there were extenuating circumstances, or if it's framed wrong, explain that out. But what Kamala Harris did was she instead went to name calling. Now, some of you guys can consider the whole Assad apologist and Russian puppet, all that legitimate criticisms to label against Tulsi Gabbard. I feel they're not, and they're almost like something what you'd hear out of a Mean Girls movie. It's not very mature, and it's not very well thought out if you actually think about the clearances and the different background checks and profiles that all of these different elected officials have to go through. If you're going to go through these different processes and have the FBI, Homeland Security, and all these different agencies checking through your background, there's no way they're going to give you clearance if they feel you are some kind of Russian asset, or that you are working with a foreign government, or that you are possibly even being used against your will or unknowingly. They're not going to give you a clearance because you're a security threat. And so anybody who is at that level, who's held office or who holds office, who levels that kind of claim without filing an ethics complaint, without, in Tulsi Gabbard's case, also going to the military and demanding an actual naval criminal investigation and possibly a court martial. Those are very serious allegations to level against somebody, especially a major who is currently in the military. And the Secretary of State, former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, knows better than that and knows that. Anybody who's not asking why, the same thing with Kamala Harris. Anytime you jump to those kind of things instead of addressing what was brought up about you, there's a problem there. Now, I heard plenty of the K-Hive and plenty of those who maybe were not strong Kamala supporters, but people who tried to defend Kamala Harris. And my issue with that is, you guys could do all you want and try to jump through hoops to try to defend Kamala Harris' record or try to reframe it in different ways. But the problem is, the candidate has to do that for themselves. And if the candidate doesn't do that, then that's going to affect the way voters see them. Now, if you're an invested supporter of a certain candidate, of course you're going to have your blinders on and not see things the same way, because it's hard to be objective when you're so close. But those of us who are not close to that candidate, or those people who are not close to any of these candidates, that doesn't look legitimate when you can't answer those questions. And so the fact that she never answered those questions, I felt, did damage to her. But what you have to focus on that happened directly before that would be the attack on Joe Biden. The attack on Joe Biden, I feel, would have been very successful if it did not look like it was completely staged and it looked like a cheap stunt. The fact that it came out shortly after that she basically held the same position on what she was criticizing him on is what destroyed her credibility even further, in my opinion. And so I feel like with that happening and having a strong attack against Biden and then having that boomerang back and attack you because you look staged, choreographed, and you don't look honest in that attack, I felt that chipped away at her credibility. And those who are not close in the Kamala Harris support bandwagon didn't notice that the rest of the electorate looked at that, and that gave them questions and pauses on if they wanted to get involved in a Kamala Harris presidency. Also, another thing that I felt was an issue is Kamala Harris decided to come directly out when asked about Reparations. She could have basically said yes or no on reparations, and we could have went from there. But Kamala's response was to ramble on for a few minutes and basically say, I'm not going to do anything for black people. That's going to make you struggle with getting the black vote. Obama, what some people say was, well, Obama didn't have this problem or this and that. There's a lot of factors that went on that are way different from now than Obama. For one, the amount of information that we're able to access is dramatically increased in the time since Obama was running. Another thing that was going on is Hillary always was unpopular in politics as a whole. She's kind of always been one of those you either love or hate kind of personalities. And whenever you have whenever you have a candidate that's that polarizing, against a candidate who comes across as very, very kind, very genuine, high energy, like Obama did when she faced him in 2008. When you're facing that, and you're facing a candidate which has been deemed some fairly and some very, very unfairly in Hillary's defense against her. Some of it truly is sexism, but every criticism of Hillary Clinton is not sexism, and it's not fair, and it's not honest to label every single criticism of a candidate as sexism just because they're a female. When I used to go to different therapies, and when I was in the military, getting out through VA, they will have us go to different counselings for various different conditions which we might have had or been diagnosed for or just want to be prevented for. And one that I remember very vividly, it talked about conflict resolutions and how to argue, or I don't want to say argue, I'll say disagree with a person, especially someone who you're close with, family, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever person, insert into that situation. How to try to be fair in getting across your point of view and your disagreements without being unfair to the person who you disagree with. So one of the things that they will always say is never wear your belt too high. And what they're saying is if you make every single argument a below the belt attack, then it makes it impossible to say anything against you, and it's not fair. It's kind of like your hands have to be tied up while they can say and do whatever to you. And my analogy there, and why I bring that up, is that's the whole thing which goes on with every single one of these female candidates right now. That's the defense which is always given. It's not that they had their chance in the sunlight. They didn't move voters the right way, and they just didn't get elected. Amy Klobuchar right now is polling very low. It's not because she's a woman. It's not. It's not at all. Amy Klobuchar is perfectly fine in the Senate. I have no problem with Amy Klobuchar in the Senate, but her policies do not inspire. They do not incite. I do not feel her presidency will make any impact or change on my life in a positive direction or in a noticeable, manner. The same way with Kamala Harris, the same way with a Sarah Palin, the same way with a Nancy Pelosi, the same way with a Hillary Clinton, the same way with a Nikki Haley. I mean, we can go down the list. It's not about it being a sexism thing, because you know what? Some of my favorite legislators are women. Katie Porter, Pramila Jayapal, I mean, that's just a few. Elizabeth Warren, when she's actually doing legislation, working with lefties, I do like some of the ideas what she comes up with when she's going after the banking industry and some of the reforms that she's trying to do as far as consumer protections. But if you get in front of a crowd and you're being heckled and you need to have another person come up on stage to help save you and guide you from the crowd, that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence for a person like me when I think about you facing Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't show any ounce of fear towards anybody from what I've seen. It could be because he's not very bright and he doesn't know who he should fear and not fear. Or maybe he just truly does not have any fear in him. And when you put him in front of a heckling crowd, one thing Donald Trump has the ability to do is, hey, maybe he'll take that crowd. He'll get combative back and forth with them, so he at least holds some kind of ground and able to walk away with a push. He will turn and start joking with the crowd, so maybe he can turn the crowd in his favor. But the one thing you would not see Donald Trump do is stand there with a mic in his hand, scared, nervous, trembling, hoping that somebody's going to come up on stage and save him. Now, I won't say when, if Warren became the nominee, she's on stage with Donald Trump, a real heckler, a real bully that's going to be directly up in her face, who's going to be invading her space. And what can you tell him to do? He's the president of the United States. You're not going to be able to tell him, Mr. Trump, Mr. President, can you please step back 3 feet so you don't crowd Senator Warren? She feels uncomfortable and she feels threatened by your aggressive manner. That's not going to work. And when she looks timid or nervous in that kind of situation, that's not going to make a lot of the country want to come her direction. Also, the fact that Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, people like that, say, I want to work with all Americans. I want to be the president for all Americans. But they say they won't go on Fox News, which I don't agree with majority of the things which I see on Fox News. But Fox News and Fox News voters are two different things. And sometimes you have to go through a little bit of the mess, to do what's necessary. I mean, you have to go on Fox if you want to talk to Republicans. And there are Republicans who might be interested in some of those policies. And if you're basically saying that I'm not even going to give these people the opportunity to hear my message because I automatically assume they're going to be turned off by it, they're going to automatically be against me, or basically you're assuming that they're some kind of negative stereotype, which I'll let you fill in the blank, whether they're describing them as a bigot, a sexist, homophobic, whatever it may be. Sorry for going a little bit, off the rails, off topic, but my point is, none of this has to do with sexism. None of this has to do with her race. It's not about that. It's especially for me and most of the people who I speak with. And through social media, through Twitter, through Facebook, through the different interactions I have with different people just out in public on the streets, because I make an effort to try to engage people in these conversations so I can try to understand where just I am versus the average person. So I'm not getting trapped into what I feel is a bubble or feeling like, well, I'm only into my lefty circle. I want to be able to engage and bring more people into the conversation, because that's the only way we understand if our message is actually going somewhere and worthwhile. And that's the only way which Kamala Harris had the opportunity to actually go anywhere, is if she had a coherent message. Everybody knows what her slogan was, because she said it numerous times. Maybe some people don't, but I do. Her slogan is Kamala for the people. But can you think of what policy which Kamala was going to enact if she would have gotten whatever she wanted in her first term, that you can imagine would have made any major difference in majority of Americans' lives? Not just your life. I mean, it's easy for us to say, well, you know, this program over here, that's going to work out for me. But I mean, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of your fellow Americans, of your neighbors, of your brothers, your sisters, of those people who you know, and imagine, is this going to help them also, or is this just going to be something for me? And if it's not something that's for majority of those people, then it's not of major significance. Then it's not going to be a real reason for her to be in there. And you got to understand that that's why people are not supporting her, because she's not giving majority of people a message to cling on, versus saying, you know, hey, we can have pride in electing the first female and the first half Indian and Jamaican woman to office. I mean, I like that. I mean, I think that's good to have these accomplishments and things like that. But when you look at the statistics of what's going on in America, and I'm not talking about for those of us that are doing okay, or I'm not necessarily even saying me, but for those who are doing all right, and for most Americans overall, we are doing okay. I mean, we all have our problems and our issues, but we could be in other countries which have all kind of structural problems and corruption, or massive poverty, which we're born into, which is a system which is almost like slavery itself. So we are just lucky, even just to be in the United States, whether we were born here, whether we immigrated here, whichever way we got here, we are lucky and blessed to be here. Now, just because we're lucky and blessed to be here doesn't mean that we can't try our best to fight for improvement in this nation that I believe we all love truly, whether we all have our different ways of getting to this better America. The thing we have to do is try our best to not demonize those who think differently than us, and try to have some conversations with some of these K-Hive and Kamala people. I advise down the road, not too soon, but when some of them calm down, and those who are willing and engaged to talk about policy more, who are looking for more serious structural change to help with massive levels of income inequality and poverty, especially in the state which I reside right now. I mean, literally, I can hop in the car and not be far from massive rows of encampments of homeless people who are all over the streets of California. Yeah, there's some people like Al Sharpton, Joanne Reed, Sonny Hostin, Charlamagne Tha God, Dr. Jason Johnson, just a few of the elite media who are big time Kamala fans, who were just all broken up and had a lot of problems. And I feel they were just a little bit too angry. I mean, Reverend Al, I mean, you got to remember one thing. The DNC chair is the person who set these, I guess, standards which you complain about, which every single debate increased, which made it harder on Kamala Harris because she started losing money. That was a Latino man under Barack Obama, who was president at the time when he assumed that position. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. But if you're not familiar with how a lot of these things work, Obama's going to have a heavy input, even if he was out of office, because he is the former president and still the leader of the party until a new Democratic nominee who wins the presidency takes over. So until the next Democratic president, people still look at Obama as the leader of the Democratic Party. That's why his favorability stays so high. It's not Obama is so great and everybody in the streets love Obama. They like him as a person, I feel. But when you really start asking people detailed questions about Obama's record and policy, even with a lot of the people like myself who voted for him twice, you're going to find plenty of things which we'll criticize Obama on. It's just the way you do it. Some people are a little too zealous about the way they like to go about it, and it comes across, like it could be a little bit more behind it. So, I warn of that a little bit, to not go a little too crazy with the overkill criticizing the first Black president. But Mr. Tom Pettis is the DNC chair. His vice president, I can't remember his name at the moment, but he's a Black man. So you have a Latino man, a Black man, and the former head of the party is a Black man. But yeah, you're complaining that somehow Kamala Harris is not given a fair opportunity. When she first came out, she was giving glowing media, especially from CNN and MSNBC. Then you have those like Joanne Reed and Dr. Jason Jones, or Johnson, Dr. Jason Johnson, whatever, that they complain that, they're not giving her enough media and they're not giving her attention. There are actual studies which track how much each candidate are covered and how much of it is considered positive coverage or how much is considered negative coverage. And in any way you slice it, Kamala Harris has definitely been given tons of favorable coverage. When Tulsi Gabbard went after her in the second debate, the media completely almost ignored the whole Tulsi Gabbard questioning of her, and then flipped it around on Tulsi as in, well, this Russian Assad apologist person. And nobody at all asked a question like, well, Kamala, she said this. Is this actually true? We have a record of this. And you can look this stuff up. I mean, her office is arguing on film. So, I mean, that's why I don't understand how the media didn't have any pushback ever to Kamala. But people like Joanne Reed or Dr. Jason feel that somehow she was just so mistreated by the media. Then you have people like Charlamagne Tha God and Sonny Hostin, which they bother me for other reasons. Charlamagne, being a Black man, knowing what her policies have done to the Black community, and having his ear to the Black community in a way which none of these other surrogates have. He should know better than aligning himself with a candidate who tokenly supports Black issues, but it's not going to really do anything. She's perfectly fine with working on immigration reform, but when you asked her, what are you going to do as far as a Black agenda? I'm not doing nothing for them. So forgive me if I don't have any sympathy for Kamala not being able to attract enough support. Another thing is, Kamala could have stayed in the race if she wanted to. There are people in the race who have far less money than Kamala. But the money is not why Kamala dropped out of the race, like she said. Oh yeah, I'll get back to that. But the one other person I want to talk about, Sonny Austin. I get it, Sonny. She's a prosecutor. You're a prosecutor. That's almost like seeing a version of yourself rise up also. So you got to kind of support her. But you, as a prosecutor, know what was going on with her record. Kamala was one of those type of prosecutors. You guys ever seen the movie Law Abiding Citizen? Jamie Foxx, Gerard Butler. Jamie Foxx in that movie was all about getting prosecutions and his percentage up to a certain amount. He was, I can't remember, I think he was like at 97% conviction rate. That was his goal, conviction rates. It wasn't about seeing these people as actual people. It was, hey, negotiate this deal. How can I get these numbers to pad my career? Somebody like Kamala, somebody like Sonny, how you get to places which they've gotten in their career is by being that kind of prosecutor. Period. That's how you get to where they got, from being that way, from being like that bad guy Jamie Foxx was in the beginning until the guy turns around and starts attacking everybody. So forgive me if I don't understand. But forgive me if I don't understand you guys' frustration why nobody else could take to Kamala Harris like you guys did. I get it. She's in your club. But you got to remember, it's a whole lot of us that aren't in your club. All right. Oh yeah, that's right. I said that I wanted to bring up. Oh yeah, it wasn't about. I said it wasn't about Kamala's money. Kamala didn't drop out because of money. Kamala dropped out because Kamala knew that if she did poorly in California, which she is going to do, if she would have been on the ballot, which if she didn't take herself off the ballot within a couple of days ago, she would have been on the ballot anyway, whether she got out or not. And so her polling numbers still would have reflected how she would have done, or close to what she would have done. And if she would have done 4th, 5th, 6th in her own home state, there would have been blood in the water. And there is one candidate who I believe on that stage wants her spot already, Tom Styer. So the fact that Tom Styer is very active in California politics and has talked about running for office before, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe he's actually put in paperwork before for different offices in California. So the fact with Dianne Feinstein getting a little bit older, or if he feels like Kamala's getting weaker, he's going to jump in at some point to one of those positions, especially since he's not going to make it very far in this election. What do I think now that Kamala has dropped out of the race? What do I think will be the fallout of her supporters? Where will they go? Well, that is a very tricky question. A lot of people believe that her supporters will automatically go to Buttigieg because Buttigieg is rising. And that would make sense. And that is very well possible. But it is also possible that those supporters could also decide, those supporters, one of the big things could be driving them could be that they are, it's very important for them to have a female at the top of the ticket. And so that means that that 3 or 4 or 5%, depending on what it is, could swing to an Elizabeth Warren to give her a little bit of a surge, or it could actually go to Amy Klobuchar and give her a little padding to let her go a little bit further in this race. Though I don't think it's going to matter anyway. What if all the Kamala support went to Amy Klobuchar? But those are just a couple of different ways that I could see, you know, those different supporters leaning. All depends on which way the stock looks like it's going to go, up or down for those candidates. I would wager if we were at the poker table, my chips would be on Buttigieg getting the majority of those supporters. But only time will tell. Who do I think will drop out after her? Well, I did a poll recently, and I'm still waiting out the results. And in my next video, I'll give the results of my poll. Hopefully, it got good numbers. But we'll see. The candidates which I brought up were Representative or Congressman Julian Castro. Let's see, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Senator Cory Booker, and I believe it might have been Tom Styer, if I'm not mistaken. But when I go over the poll, I'll talk about that. I think in this month, because the primaries are coming up in less than 60 days, roughly, there are 3 candidates that I've named that are struggling with their campaigns monetarily. One of those campaigns, Cory Booker. The next one, Amy Klobuchar. And the other one, Julian Castro. They, all 3, have had stories about shutting down offices or asking for more campaign cash. And none of their poll numbers are really moving very much. So I expect for possibly Castro to drop out first. Then shortly after, you can see Booker, and then Klobuchar. I'm not sure if they want to face the same fate which Kamala is facing, possibly looking weaker and having somebody want to challenge you in your home state. And then also that money which you normally have in a presidential run, when you drop out as a sitting senator or representative, a lot of times you flip that money into your next congressional or Senate run. So if you spend too much of that money and you've done enough damage to your brand out on the campaign trail, it's possible that you might have difficulty raising funds. So you might want to get out of the race so you can save some of the funds which you've raised now for this campaign to transfer later. So I'm looking at those 3 in particular to drop out soon. Bennett eventually, once the Michael Bennett, who a lot of people forget who was even in it, from Colorado, I believe once the impeachment trial moves over to the Senate, at that time he'll eventually drop out of the race also. And then it'll be up to the, I guess we'll call them our top tier candidates, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, and I'll consider Pete Buttigieg a top tier candidate because he is in first and second, spots in New Hampshire and Iowa, depending on which polls you read. They could be outliers, but it could be something actually there. So most of the trend numbers, though, in the polls do show that he has been legitimately rising. So it's just a matter of how much of that is an actual real surge that'll turn into votes in New Hampshire and will actually turn into, you know, what he needs in the caucus in Iowa. Uh, I have a feeling that because Bernie has been through Iowa caucus before, that he has experience with caucuses in general and typically does better in caucuses. I expect for him to overperform, and a lot of the numbers I don't feel are as close as they may seem at the moment. If he's able to rattle into Iowa and New Hampshire also and do well, it looks rough for a Buttigieg. So I see it possibly by Super Tuesday. Most of the field will narrow down to a three-way race with our two wild cards of Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard rounding out the rest of the field. I guess that's about all I have for you. Hope you all have a good night, good evening. All right, I guess that's about all that I got. I thank you all for taking the time to sit down and watch. Hopefully it was entertaining. Hopefully you come back and catch my next video.